Industry leaders are warning that factories could close this week, later this very week, because of soaring energy prices. But as they look to the government to help them, the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, has been accused by the Treasury of, quote, making things up over a possible bailout to help factories stay open.
And the Prime Minister is on holiday in Spain. So who is currently in charge? Let's ask the Security Minister, Damian Hinds. Very good morning to you. I wonder if it's unfair of people to say that the Prime Minister shouldn't take a holiday. But on the other hand, we do seem to be heading into a crisis with soaring energy bills, businesses complaining, the universal credit uplift cancelled, cost of living crisis, inflation on the rise, and now Treasury sources complaining about the Business Secretary. Who's got their hand on the tiller?
Well, you started by posing the question, who's in charge? The answer is the Prime Minister's in charge, because when you're the Prime Minister, you're always in charge.
Why would you leave the country if you're in charge?
You're always in touch and you're always a phone call away. But I do think it's also important that everybody should be able to have a break, some downtime, some reflection time, some rest, and I think that's just as important when you're the Prime Minister. It's important for him and his family, but actually it's important for the rest of us as well. But the whole of government takes responsibility for government policy. And yes, you're quite right that something like this global rise in gas prices that we've seen is a significant issue. And of course, it's right that the Business Secretary, Energy Secretary, and the Treasury are going to be very, very focused on those things.
The trouble is we don't know who to believe. We just don't know who to believe. I mean, Kwasi Kwarteng was on live television yesterday. Many of us in the studio watched it. He said specifically that he was in talks with the Treasury about helping industry. He said it. And then within a couple of hours, Treasury spokesman told brief journalists, ITN, Sky, that was completely untrue, that it was made up, and it was not the case and hadn't been the case. Who do we believe? Do we believe the Business Secretary or do we believe an unnamed source in the Treasury? Who do you believe?
Well, I think part of the clue there, Richard, is in the phrase that you just used, unnamed source. I wasn't in that conversation, and neither, I think, were you. We don't know what was in that conversation. What I do know is that government ministers are in constant touch with each other, and government departments are in constant touch with each other, as they should be. And on an issue like that, on the global rise in energy prices, of course, the Business Secretary is going to be very focused on industry, and particularly energy-intensive industries. And of course, the Treasury is going to be very focused on effects on the economy. I mean, I think it is.
So hang on.
Yeah.
So the Business Secretary is in talks with the Treasury over what can be done to help in this crisis.
So what I was just saying, Susanna, was government ministers talk to one another the whole time, and departments are in constant touch with each other as well. Look, we've just had this period of genuinely unprecedented, and that's become a word we've used so much, isn't it, over the last couple of years? But the package of support for business, £100 billion over the course of the pandemic, has been truly without precedent and globally leading. And we're now seeing some of the benefits of that, of course, with the strength of this recovery, the bounce back on after COVID.
Yeah, except we're seeing this unprecedented, massive rise in the wholesale gas price. And that's what these energy-intensive businesses are really concerned about. There is a price cap for domestic fuel bills, but not for industry fuel, and that's what they want to know. The Business Secretary is going to try and help them out with. Are you concerned that there's a source within the Treasury who has it in for the Business Secretary? I mean, it isn't just to say, that source could have said exactly what you said. Of course, we're sitting down in regular meetings to try and solve this crisis. But instead, we have, it's a horrible phrase. This is not the first time the Business Secretary has made things up in interviews. I mean, this at a time when business needs help, they also need to have confidence in your government.
Yeah, of course they do, Suzanne. And look, I don't know who that source was, and I don't know exactly what they said, and I certainly don't know why. But I do know the important thing, as you just rightly said, is working together with business, and the Business Secretary has been in regular talks with industry. I think again will be will be today. There has been this very large package of support for business overall, and specifically for the energy-intensive industries that you mentioned. Over the last 8 years or so, for those industries like steel and glass and cement and others, there's been, I think, something like £2 billion worth of specific support to help with their electricity, with their energy, as we move to decarbonise, move to a net zero future. That does create extra challenges for those businesses.
All right.
In an industry which, if you take steel, for example, is already, competitively, is already very difficult because of the global overproduction, particularly from China. But UK steel is a particularly high quality product. It's a strategic product for this country, and that's one of the reasons why there has been this support.
Well, let's move to the very specific crisis that's facing us, apparently, according to some factory owners, this week. They're tapping out an SOS. They're a bit like the Titanic. They're going tap, tap, tap. We are sinking. We need help this week. Otherwise, we're going to be shutting. We're going to be closing down. You've got the glass industry saying that they have to keep their furnaces rolling 24/7 or every day of the year. Otherwise, their furnaces aren't usable. And they're saying that they're about to close. Are you going to help them this week? Is there going to be an announcement of some kind of grant aid, or are you going to get a fuel cap on industry this week? Because they're saying that this week is where the train hits the buffers. It's coming at us in the next 2 or 3 days.
So, Richard, I straightforwardly can't answer that question directly myself, but I do know that the Business Secretary, the Energy Secretary, is in constant dialogue, and I think it will be again today with those industries. And there is a recognition that it is clearly is a very difficult circumstance. It's worth repeating. It's a global issue, but I know that those talks are ongoing.
And how are we doing at the moment with HGV drivers? How many extra HGV drivers are we getting in order to make sure that our shelves are full of food in the run-up to Christmas?
Yeah, so again, Susanna, I totally acknowledge that there, of course, as we all know, there are challenges or difficulties with supply chains, and we've seen that most acutely, of course, on petrol forecourts, but there are others as well. And there's a whole range of things that government has done to try and help with that.
Do you know how many people have applied for the special visas to be HGV drivers?
So I can't tell you the latest number on how many people have specifically applied, but the programme is open, and we have allowed for thousands of extra visas, some specifically for tanker drivers, and then more for the wider HGV sector. But the long-term sustainable solution isn't about visas and about bringing more people in. It's about more people being attracted to work in that business. It's part of the high-wage, high-productivity economy that the PM was talking about in his conference speech, and that ultimately is a lot about industry, but it's also about making sure the skills, the training support is there, and we've done more to increase the number of HGV driver training places, trying to make sure the administrative processes, like on licensing and so on, are made to work as well as possible, particularly because of the disruption there's been through COVID.
Well, very briefly, because we're almost out of time, but talking about people coming into this country, we've seen another wave of migration across the Channel this weekend during this Indian summer, this calm weather. Many people arriving on the shores of Kent. The French saying that they would be able to do more to help them if we gave them the money that we promised them weeks ago. They're saying they haven't seen a red cent of it yet. Any chance of that money being paid over that we promised them?
Well, I think they said not a single euro rather than a red cent. But yes, of course we're going to be providing that money. We've agreed that the figure of the £54 million, that's enabling more people, colleagues across the Channel in France to work on this. So, and we need that programme. What the French authorities do is vital, and we need it even to increase, but vital in terms of deterring, turning back these, wicked people who put other people's lives directly in danger for profit. Yes, of course, we need to work through the mechanisms for getting the actual money transfer done, but it's an agreement that is there, and of course we'll see it through. All
right, Mr. Hinds, thank you for your time. I hope you have a good week. I think it's going to be a difficult one, but we'll see what turns up. Thanks very much indeed.